and welcome to the Summoning Hour with your host, me, Recall, and this is my inaugural segment / podcast. So, in this cast, I just want to talk about who I am, what the goal of this podcast is, and the topics I want to cover, and have a good time telling a few stories or helping people out who might be calling in, leaving me messages, and just asking for help. What is the goal? Now, I've been listening to a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk and trying to be motivational. I've also spent a number of years listening to a website utility that's managertools.com, manager-tools.com. And I've been listening to their podcasts about management, what it means to be a leader, and how I would want to run my team, or how I have run my team at this point, or how I would want to run my company or department, whichever point I get to. And so this is just something that's important to me. And ultimately, the one thing that I've learned recently and kind of found the words for is the goal is to fail. I know that sounds weird to some people, but in failure, we learn. And it gives us opportunity to not only teach ourselves, but then teach someone else so that they learn through our mistakes. And I know this is stuff that our parents have told us, or teachers or peers or coaches have all told us, that it's okay to fail, and as long as you learn from your mistakes. And it's absolutely true, but as a kid growing up, it just never really sinks in. And now that I'm doing this, and I'm doing a whole brand exploration through social media, and my passion is to teach people, is to train people, and it's to help everything get going, which is honestly how I found my way from QA and into production. So that's a little bit more about me. But through the act of failing and trying things, we can't be afraid of what people think of us or how we want to explore things. So if you've learned a new one-on-one tool, or a new breakdown, or a different way to have a conversation with a difficult coworker, you're learning and you're trying, and you shouldn't be afraid of what that reaction is. So ultimately, it's about learning more about ourselves, myself, and the games industry by the stories that other people have to share that I want to bring in. So a little more happiness, a little bit of learning, and just that opportunity to grow, to do something with my passions that are outside of work. And this is something that I can call mine. So it's a little bit selfish, but it's also more about the people I'm reaching out to, because everyone knows that the games industry is exploding right now, and the rise of eSports is a big deal. Indie developers are growing in numbers. I mean, just look at every single PAX that's out there, or the number of game jams that are popping up, and it's amazing. So if I can help teach someone something that makes their project go a little smoother, that makes it easier for them to make their dreams come true, if it's to be a designer or an artist, then my lessons and my time spent in the industry making it grow is just where I want to be. That's what I want to do. So it makes it easy to put this out there, put myself out there, and be able to help. So that's pretty cool, and that's something that I do enjoy. Well, that's this segment, and let's move on to the topics. All right, the topics. Well, game development, esports, management, and games in general. This is something that I've thought about for a while now, and it's easy to understand once you get to know me a little bit more, which I'm sure you will over the next few podcasts, and hopefully over the series, however long I want to keep this going. But the plan is to keep it going for years. So game development, and how it's not for those who are averse to risk. I mean, there is a lot to go down. It's still a young industry in a lot of respects, and it's a sink or swim culture, which I can touch on a little bit more when I talk about management. And of course, there's still the not great environments for some areas where there's a lot of crunch, there's a lot of personal sacrifice, even beyond what you want to do, because there's still a certain amount of sacrifice that you give up when you have these projects with 40 to 50 to 100 to 200 people all working on it all at once. And nowadays you have companies like Ubisoft or the development behind Star Citizen, where it's distributed studios and they're all working on different things, but then they all have to come together. Those kinds of environments, I can only imagine, and now I don't know, but I can only imagine how chaotic and how much you all have to work around each other in different time zones. And just from management experience, I know that that's not always ideal or always easy. But in terms of game development, I would love to talk about strategies, whether it's how people are handling group meetings or troublesome folks who aren't contributing or contributing in a negative way that takes away from the group. Crunch, and again, the young industry, we're still figuring out a lot of this process and a lot of how to make things work and how to hold people accountable for the work that they have to do without just kind of sacrificing the soul of what it means to make games. I mean, when you think about it, the word games is a way of establishing rules to have fun or to learn something. Management has been a huge passion of mine since I got a lead position in QA at ArenaNet, and learned a lot through the podcasts, as I said, through manager tools and a lot of additional reading on my own. So there's an infinite challenge in it, and it's all on you. You are held accountable to a different standard. You're held by others to a different standard, and people depend on you. People depend on you for their career growth. People depend on you to be honest with them and candid and have those difficult conversations. It's definitely not easy, and maybe at one point I'll be able to tell you how I got my big boy voice for the first time when I had the first opportunity where I had to have a discussion that led to someone being laid off, and how that changed my perspective on a lot, and it was extremely difficult for me. But that's the kind of growth that you'll go through on occasion. It's not the most common of occurrences that I've had, at least. And it's not a sexy position. It's not always fun. It's a lot of your day-to-day isn't fun, but it's necessary, and it impacts not only your future, but the future of your studio, your future of your team, and the future of the product. So, man, that's a lot of weight to carry, and you need quality people in those positions, which is another conversation to have later when you get down to brass tacks and you start thinking how some people got into certain positions, and you realize they got there because they were a great individual contributor, not that they actually wanted to lead. And you see those shortcomings or that desire not to reach out to grow in that regard actually impacting the entire team, like I said. So it's something that's a little nugget for you to keep an eye out for, and ear out for as well, just to see how people behave and see if it's really something that they're truly passionate about, or if they're just there by chance. All right, that's management and game development. The next section, eSports. All right, topic number 3, eSports. This for me is that long goal, that 5-10 years down the road kind of goal, or however long it takes. This means kind of everything to me. I missed the wave of when esports was becoming a thing while I was working or going to college, because that's what you were supposed to do when I was, or 10 years ago, when esports were finally starting to get some movement beyond the grassroots movement. So owning a successful global esports team across multiple games, that is the end goal for me. Once I get there, I'm going to be unhappy because I don't know what else to do. Just like how Gary Vaynerchuk wants to own the New York Jets, and that's going to be the saddest day in his life when he owns them. It's going to be the saddest day of my life when I get to that goal of where I am rubbing shoulders with people who are investing in esports games, and I have a team that represents a high skill level and I've hired the best managers, the best coaches, and people who believe in that same goal, and who believe in me to drive that goal. I mean, if you look at people like Rick Fox and his Echo Fox team, and how he presents himself, his company, the teams, the players, the sport, esports in general, that is who I hope to be as an owner, and as a manager, and as a peer among other esport team owners. He gets it, and he's a fantastic introduction to, if you're a parent or if you're a kid trying to understand what you want to move into. I can't speak towards how the actual teams run or how happy the players are, but everything I am seeing about Rick Fox and the Echo Fox team family is that is a great environment. But maybe at some point I can get some players on here, or former players, and we can really dive into what that culture is like right now or 2 years from now when people want to talk to me like that. So let's talk about esports. I mean, esports is huge right now. You have Rocket League, League of Legends, Dota 2, Heroes of the Storm, StarCraft 2, Call of Duty, Halo, Gears of War, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time until some form of esports is happening with Monster Hunter World or a game like that where it's entirely leaderboard based. And you got World of Warcraft still doing arena PvP, and I haven't seen it since around BlizzCon when they were doing dungeon competitions, PvE running, and time trials like that. So, I mean, that idea of what constitutes an esport is growing and changing, even with games that are, 12 years old? Is that how old WoW is? 14 years old? Oh god, it's 2018. Oh man. Now I feel old. So it's like 14 years old. Almost be 15 in October? Yeah, that's insane. That's nuts. So that's esports, and we can talk news, we can talk what constitutes a good esport, we can say we can talk about prize pools, how people are getting money for these pools, how are teams paid, how are players played, how does a new team form, how does getting those sponsorships, what happens when a community really comes together and bring up players, what kind of feeding systems do we have? I mean, we've got high school and collegiate esports systems coming online. There's even a youth esports association. I haven't done much looking into them, but I mean, could you imagine having Pee-wee esports? Yeah, let's get our 6-7-year-old Rocket League division players out here. Could you imagine how good some of those kids would be if they started playing Rocket League when they were 5, pick up a controller for the first time, and they ground that for 15 years? By the time they're in high school, they're going to be all-stars. They'll be participating in the Olympics when they finally get their act together and bring esports in. That is another topic that we can talk about another time. There's a lot of controversy or a lot of public opinion that esports don't belong in the Olympics, but probably not for the reason that you're thinking about. And that is a hook that we can use for another time. But, next topic, how do I fit in all of this? Alright, how do I fit into all this? Well, I have been a lifelong gamer, and I can't remember a time where I didn't want to work in games. I mean, that was a formulated thought as young as I can remember. And I have to think back to all the times where I was on my dad's lap while he was fiddling with his Commodore 64, and I was watching him play Bard's Tale or Questron, and seeing how he can get through those games, or Mission Impossible. My god, that game. I don't know how my dad did it without a manual, but he did it. That game was ridiculous and just a massive puzzle. And maybe that's just my own recollection of the game, but I never beat it. And I ended up playing it for a couple years before I ended up getting an NES system where I learned basic spelling and some mental math from Final Fantasy. And that was the first time that I had actually played a game, or my brother and I would trade off. I would pilot the boat or drive around the forest, journey around the forest, walk around the forest, and my brother would handle combat, and he would do the reading, and that's what he did. He was an older brother, and I couldn't read at that point, but I was learning how to spell run and magic and fight and the player names, the enemy names, all that kind of stuff, and doing mental math by seeing how much damage they did and seeing how much health our characters had. And my god, I mean, between the NES system and the Commodore 64 and playing games like Batman or Mission Impossible and Rampage and trying my hand at Questron and trying my hand at Bard's Tale, all of that just fed me and fed me and fed me and fed me. And so even as the generations went on with Sega Genesis, and we got our first PCs like 92, 93, and by 94 we were hooked up to 2 PCs. We were on the internet. We were doing TCP/IP games, my brother and I, with Doom, with StarCraft 1, with Warcraft, or we weren't doing TCP/IP with Warcraft, but we were playing Warcraft 1 and loving that, and we just built up that insane knowledge. And my dad was really into getting new PC hardware, and that's where we learned how to put together our own computers. And that was, I mean, some of those foundational moments is how I got here, is that I know this stuff. Maybe not to the degree the hardcore enthusiasts do, but I have all of that base knowledge and experience and memories of doing this, and that kind of stuff. If I could teach, if I can pass on, that's a huge, really cool moment. And I've got my kids dressing up like me for school when they're dressing up for their favorite person kind of deal. And so they idolize me to some regard, and I want to represent. That's how I fit into this. I want to be a huge gateway, not only for my kids, but your kids if you're a parent, and you, if you're listening and you want to get into the games industry. That's how I fit in. I want to be your gateway. I want to be your enabler to say what needs to be said, to get you motivated and get you in here. And so that's that passion that's inside of me. And after high school, I decided I was going to go to a school for an art degree, and I was going to get that traditional foundation. And once I got my foot in the door, I was just going to bust my ass and walk that artist route, because that's just where my headspace was. And it actually ended up being a little bit more different than I thought it was going to be. So I did the college route for getting an art degree, and after I graduated, I started testing at Microsoft. I was put onto the Halo Wars team, where I tested Halo Wars for about 8 months. You can find me in the credits. That was my first game credit. It was really kind of awe-inspiring, and as much as some of the stories I might have in the future about that, it was still a big moment for me. And it was a big deal. That was the dream up until it happened, and then I was like, what next? And it's like, okay, well, when that contract ends, what am I going to do? Luckily for me, I had some connections over at ArenaNet, and so I was hired on as an environments tester for Guild Wars 2. I was tester number 5, I think. I have a team that eventually grew to like 55 or so. And once I got there, it was shortly thereafter, as the team grew and there was more testing requirements needed, and I couldn't do it all by myself, so I had my team, and that's where I found I was really good with management. I was enthralled with the information that was coming at me from my peers there at ArenaNet, and the information I could find online through managertools.com, and a number of authors who have written stuff that are considered classics. I would happily give you my reading list, which maybe I'll publish to Instagram or Twitter after this, or another time if someone reminds me, or if I remind myself. So that's where I got into management, and that's where I've found how important it is, and where I've seen a lot of misses where things could have been so much better, or why certain things fell through the cracks was because expectations weren't there, and repercussions weren't there, and team management was not there. And so and that's not unique to any of the studios I've been at, or any of the studios you've been at, or any studios you've heard of, and there's stories all over, and these companies are too big for a single person to be expected to be perfect all the time. And so most of our job is to put out fires as managers, or as after 5 years and shipping Guild Wars 2 around the world, including China, and then helping out a little bit with the first expansion, I moved on for a short stint at Microsoft again, where I worked on Sunset Overdrive, got that game out the door, and then shortly thereafter I was hired as a production coordinator at Wargaming Seattle. And with all of that, with the experience with management and into production, it was just a natural fit for me. It was a natural evolution as well, for that, creating order and creating a plan and being able to see the big picture and the long-term scheduling. And it was, with my art background, it was a great opportunity to be able to communicate with them and understand their needs, while having a lifelong history of playing games and breaking games down and learning these systems and reading about them as websites were coming on and people were doing interviews with designers, and how that became prevalent. I was able to understand and talk game design with folks, and that's how I've gotten in with learning how to talk to designers and programmers. I mean, my brother is an engineer, so I've gotten some experience talking to engineers just because I apply what I know about my brother and how he approaches his work. So I have this hugely rounded out exposure to a ton of different disciplines as well as personalities after 10 years. So making order from chaos is just kind of what I've grown into, and being able to separate myself from the game and what needs to get done is probably one of the things that I pride myself on most nowadays. And that's how that's how I fit into all of this, is that I missed my chance with esports and I want fucking in. Like, I'm not going to make it a habit to swear in this, but I want in, and this is going to be mine, and I've got all these base skills. I just need to challenge myself and get in on this and make sure I'm a part of it, because my name will be etched in some way, shape, or form about how esports grows. And to go along with all of that with esports and what I want from it, this is also, and as much as this is going to be a huge learning opportunity for me and a growth opportunity for me, but I want to publicize my failures in this regard. Like I said, this is the mission of this podcast, is to fail, and I will fail, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again and again and again. And hopefully that's going to serve a little bit as a model for anyone who wants to get into the games industry. And just as a quick note, there are a lot of forum posts and Twitter posts and Instagram questions, though not as many on Instagram as I would have thought, but Twitter and forums and gaming communities where people are like, oh, I want to get into the games industry or into esports, and I play a lot of games, or I know a lot about games, and that's not enough anymore. That wasn't enough when I got into it, and it certainly wasn't enough now, or it's certainly not enough now. I want to help people understand what they need to be doing so that they have a shot. And my help isn't going to help you immediately. It's not going to help you nail an interview and suddenly just be on your rise to fame or cruising through promotion after promotion or anything like that. It's going to take time and effort, and interviews are not going to go well. You're going to get rejected, and I hope you can accept failure the same way that I'm looking at it, because it's not going to be an easy route, and you have to be programming, you have to be a talented artist, you have to be a thoughtful designer, you have to be able to find a pulse of what's going on in the gaming industry, or find an untapped location of interest, just like with PUBG and Fortnite's battle royale. Like, you tap that industry and you found something that was unique and unpopulated, and you found something that got people energized about, and just like kind of Monster Hunter World, it'll spike and then it'll go away. But games like World of Warcraft, how it just blew everything out of the water and 14 years later it still stands, like that's the kind of stuff designers need to be thinking about. And it's not going to be all glitz and glam. You will, as an artist, spend days drawing and painting bushes or dirt or making little pickaxes or candles and dishes and things to populate the world. It's not going to be anything cool like doing the protagonist or the giant 30-story boss QuickTime event kind of deal. And that's not where you're going to start. You're going to be doing a lot of data entry. You're going to be doing a lot of grunt labor that other designers just don't want to do, or other artists don't want to do. And that's just what you have to put up with. So it behooves you to start now and get really good beyond all that. But then also, if you take one of those jobs, understand you're going to have to do the shit work. Don't complain about it. Don't want more. Just heads down and do it. That's what people want. And when the opportunity someone asks you, what do you want to do? What do you think? Make sure you're ready. Just make sure you're ready, and we can talk about what it means to be ready when you need to give feedback. Now, I'm new to working with eSports, so this is as much of an education for myself as it is anyone who's listening. So if you've got any particular insight, I would love to hear it. I would love to talk with you and get some more in-depth understanding. So again, feel free. This is on Anchor when I'm casting this, so feel free to call in and leave messages for me. And now it's story time. So story time. So this is a little bit of a story that kind of emphasizes why I want to keep doing what I'm doing and drive so much farther than that. This was, 2009 or 2010. This was at PAX. I had volunteered to work the ArenaNet booth when Guild Wars 2 was first announced, where there was a gameplay trailer and we were giving away art books, and all of the ArenaNet employees were signing them. And you'll find Evan Teixeira, or at Leo Pluridoom on Twitter. He was a fan. He was a die-hard fan of Guild Wars 1, and he must have gotten every single ArenaNet employee's signature who was at PAX at any point in time that entire weekend. And so I was standing at the booth doing the line ushering, and sure enough, he went back through the line, came back through to me. At that point in time, my mindset was I was just QA, and my old coworkers would have my head. I have my own head for even thinking that. Don't let anyone tell you you are just QA, and we can go off on that another time for sure. But he came back to me, and I signed his book. He was starstruck. He was literally starstruck. And Evan is the nicest guy in the world. Abundance of happiness and positivity. So shortly after, I don't know how long after, probably 6 months or so, maybe 8 months, he got hired into QA because of his passion for Guild Wars 1, but then also what he was providing for the community and being kind of a hub for people and just a good networking person. And he had met a number of the ArenaNet employees and made a really good impression with them, and his knowledge and what he knew of the community. So he was valuable to ArenaNet, and so they brought him in for his care of community and customer service, along with his ability to test. He was submitting bug reports, and this was before my time there. He was submitting bug reports constantly, trying to get Guild Wars 1 to be the best game ever. And once he joined the Guild Wars 2 team, he was by far one of my favorites to work with, and he ended up leading the QA community group, who did a lot of outreach to alpha testers and test groups, and managed the forums and looked over the forums and found your guys' bugs and got them through the QA process, whether we already had bugs written up for them or made sure new bugs were reported and got back to you guys and made sure that everyone understood that your guys' needs on the forums and social media were being taken care of. He worked very closely with the community team members at ArenaNet at that point, so closely that he was basically an honorary member, and he was involved in a lot of their priorities. And so this is just a quick story about passion, drive, and not only, and like I said, not just playing a lot of games was not good enough when I got in, and it wasn't good enough for Evan either. He had a learning mentality. He was willing to take feedback. He was willing to take direction because he was starstruck. He didn't know how games were made. And he still brought that value of community and understanding how to reach out to people, how to interact with people, and how to make sure he was treating them with the respect that they deserved as fans of a product, of fanatics of a product, and what people expected of the next product. So he was a huge boon to ArenaNet, and eventually he moved on to Motiga, RIP, gigantic, and guess what? Shortly, not too long ago, he's found his way back to ArenaNet, and I think that's where he's going to be for a very long time, where he makes a lot of people very happy and does excellent work. I'm sure of it, even though I'm not there. And it's just that kind of confidence in a person that, and what they bring to the table, that I want to make sure everyone is aware of. And in time, I believe I will be doing a sit-down interview with him, so we can get some more fun stories from that time of Guild Wars 2 when we were both working together, and some of the things that he's grown learning through his experience at Motiga, and what it's like coming back to ArenaNet years later. Alright, that's it for the first inaugural episode of the Summoning Hour. Thank you for the summons. I will meet you back here in about a week or so for episode 1 of the Summoning Hour. This is going to be a lot of fun. Lots of learning experience. Hopefully feedback is key. Hopefully there's feedback for me to fail at, or something that I failed at in this episode. So I want to disappoint you, and you don't have to tell me I disappointed you, but you letting me know that I disappointed you, or that I failed you in some way to communicate, or I didn't bring something that you're really hoping to hear from someone who's been in the games industry, or who has this information and drive and desire to grow within esports, call me out. I dare you. No, I don't need to taunt you. I'm sure if there's something wrong, y'all tell me. So let's just agree to fail together. Let's make adjustments and keep moving forward. Thanks again for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I look forward to my next podcast, where I will be interviewing my brother, who is a engineer, a tools engineer. Yeah, that one. At Bungie, where he works on Destiny 2. Thanks everyone, and I will see you at the next Summoning Hour.